tell you the story of what we British did for the Indians and how we made them civilised. On the good ship, Lollipop, it's a nice trip into bed to hop and dream away. On the good ship, Lollipop.
It was different. It was not like the normal sitcom.
I'm an innocent who's been brutalised by war.
Good scripts, terrific writing, brilliant casting, including myself.
You're all smart, New York men about town.
My saviour. Absolutely my saviour, my dear. He saved me from, I don't know, being a great actor. I loved it.
From Curtain Up in 1974, It Ain't Half Hot Mum was a hit. Set in India at the end of World War II, it ran until 1981, a year longer than the war itself. The antics of the Royal Artillery Concert Party were a jewel in the crown of the writing duo Jimmy Perry and David Croft, who had been turning out classic comedies since the 1960s. But It Ain't Half Hot Mum's story starts well before the war it was depicting. Show business was in David Croft's blood. His parents were both entertainers, and he was still in short trousers when he made his cinema debut, albeit in a flower commercial.
All parents would discourage their children from going to show business, but at the same time, I think they thought it was inevitable, really.
Jimmy Perry was infatuated with showbiz from an early age.
My father was at breakfast one day, and he said he's got the school report. He said, "This is disgraceful. Your report says this boy shows no ability for anything whatsoever. We fear for his future." And my dear dad said, "But you've got to have qualifications." And I said, "I don't want any qualifications. I'm going to be a famous film star or a great comedian." And then he had that look on his face, and he said, "You stupid boy."
When war broke out in 1939, it seemed to have put an end to both Croft and Perry's performing careers. Both were called up to serve in India. Croft rose smartly through the ranks, making Major at the age of 23, and Perry served as a sergeant and a producer in the Royal Artillery Concert Party. As much as they hated it, it was the experience of war that gave them a common ground and would inspire their greatest work.
I always thought of the war as an unwelcome interruption like everybody else did, so I couldn't wait to get out of the army.
Steptoe and Son gave David Croft a chance to cut his teeth in the battleground of television.
Yes, it's quite elegant, albeit a trifle ostentatious. Where was you thinking of putting it?
In the carsy.
Steptoe and Son was a wonderful show to be walking around on, because there were two masterly actors, and also Duncan Wood, who was the producer there. He understood reaction comedy and was the first person really to point it out to me.
Meanwhile, Jimmy Perry was working strenuously to get into the limelight. After graduating from RADA in 1949, he appeared in the stage production of Ghost Train and then gained a small part in the ITV sitcom Sam and Janet. But this hardly satisfied his acting ambitions.
I was in some sitcoms you will not believe. I was in it to give it a bit of lift. And I thought, I can't stand this any longer. All these rotten parts. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I will write a situation comedy and I'll write a good part for myself. That's what I'll do.
So Perry put pen to paper, and once he had a script together, he had to get it under the nose of a successful producer. As luck would have it, David Croft had just cast Jimmy in the series Beggar My Neighbour.
My wife represented Jimmy Perry, actually, and she said, well, I think he would play a noisy fanboy character very well.
What's your mate? Here, what are you all ponced up for? Got a job as a waiter or something?
The first time I saw David Croft in the studio, I thought, oh, wait a minute, he looks a bit grumpy to me. I better watch my P's and Q's.
He said to my wife, I've got this idea for a thing about the Home Guard. Do you think I'd dare show it to David? She said, you show it to him, I'll make sure he reads it.
It was through that meeting on the production of Beggar My Neighbour in 1967 that one of the greatest writing duos began.
The door burst open, in came David. He said, this is great. I think it's got great possibilities. I said, shall we work on it together? You know, I'd have worked with Hitler on it. I would like.
Who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler? If you
That script, based on his own wartime experiences, became Dad's Army. It was a situation comedy that set the template for much of Croft and Perry's work. It featured an ensemble of larger-than-life characters in a period setting based on real events that were still alive in people's minds.
When we first went filming in the early 70s, everybody had been in the war, and people in jobs all knew what we were on about.
I'm surprised at you, Mannering. Your men are always so smartly turned out. Why isn't Corporal Jones wearing his equipment? And what's this great lump of string hanging down his back?
Even with Dad's Army up and running, Perry wasn't quite ready to let go of his acting career. But Croft and the head of comedy, Michael Mills, had other ideas.
I wrote the part of Walker, Private Walker, for my Spiv, weren't it?
Get that off.
Hang on, Mr. Mannering. That's a sacred order of the Golden Chris of Abu Dhabi.
Given to you.
And Michael Mills said, I'm sorry, Jimmy. He said, you've got to make up your mind which end of the camera you're going to be. You can't do everything. And Davey said, no, you can't do everything, Jim. He said, if you're in amongst that lot was these hardened old-timers that we'd got together. And you get laughs, they're not going to like it. I was very fed up at the time, but I thought, just as well. And with hindsight, it doesn't matter.
You stupid boy.
By putting his acting career on permanent hold, Perry had taken a decision that would have far-reaching effects on the world of sitcom. By the early 1970s, Dad's Army was getting over 18 million viewers, almost outnumbering the catchphrases. Eager to build on this success, Croft worked on another idea with comedy writer Jeremy Lloyd, featuring a department store and several blue rinses.
And I said, David, what are we going to do to follow up Dad's Army? What about doing the Royal Artillery Concert Party?
Once again, they turned to the war for raw material. Perry's time in the concert party was an untapped hotbed of gags, innuendo, and the ever-popular Men in Drag. These became the essential ingredients for It Ain't Half Hot, Mum.
When I first arrived in India, we went to a place near Bombay called Kalyan, which is a transit camp. And, we had troops bashers there. And it was almost like a little village, really, a little army village.
Get on for Ida!
You all had a basher with about 8 squaddies living there. So it straight away gave you the atmosphere.
The setting was a place that Jimmy knew well.
In the days of the Raj, there was a mental home for British services. The name of the place was Doolally, and he'd gone a bit Doolally tap. That's where it all originated from.
Does everybody that's been stationed out here in Doolally for a long time get the Doolally tap?
Pretty well, everyone, yeah.
The location set, attention turned to casting. Up first, the leading lady, Mr. Gloria Beaumont.
I wanted John Inman in the first instance, to be honest. But then I'd already got him into I Being Served.
Mr. Humphreys, are you free?
I'm busy pricing my ties, Captain Peacock.
The gentleman wishes to try on a dress.
I'm free.
And he was terribly funny in that and absolutely beautifully suited. So he was eliminated, really.
Next to be considered for the part was an actor who started young. Melvin Hayes made his first television appearance in Quatermass. He then went on to get regular work in the series Dixon of Dock Green. But it was in the 1960s that he made his name as Cliff Richard's sidekick.
What's slowing us down?
This hill. I think it's a 1-in-1.
Sir, listen to me. But don't turn around.
David Croft only asked me one question the entire time. He said, excuse me, he said, could you just lift your hair up like that? And I said, yes, I did it. He said, fine. And that was given the part.
Gloria, you look marvellous.
Well, I must say I have gone to a lot of trouble, and I think it's paid off.
About 2 years later, having a quiet drink one night with David, I said, tell me, I said, what was the thing about the hair? He said, well, I was hoping, you see, if the show's a success, you might be in it for years. And I didn't want it to have a bald-headed guy just had his hair combed forward. After about 4 weeks, David took me aside and said, Melvin, he said, we're going to find it very difficult to write for you. And I said, why? They said, well, you're playing it very effeminately. I said, just a minute, David. I said, the character's called Gloria. He dresses up as a woman. He's got outrageous dialogue. I said, and he's very theatrical. He said, yeah, I see what you mean. We never spoke about it again.
You can rely on me, Sergeant Major.
The only thing I can rely on you for, Bombardier, is to ponce about. Like a rheumatic-y old tart.
We used to debate whether he was gay or not, and I don't think he was.
Oh, Gloria was gay, yeah. As the character, yes.
The character wasn't. He was just a bit camp.
We want Gloria! Oh, listen to that. They're shouting, we want Gloria! My public are clamouring for me.
Next to be cast was the concert party producer. The role fell to George Layton, whose career saw success on both sides of the camera. In 1973, he co-presented That's Life.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the part of the programme that's useful. Those others, mere entertainers.
Early that same year, he was writing and acting in Doctor in Charge, but one of his first writing successes came with On the Buses. Perfect training for producing an unruly mob.
Go on, come for me. It's no good. Are you going to start again? What do you mean it's no good?
You've got to come for me like you really mean it.
I think Solly and Gloria were very enthusiastic. You know, they hated the gang mucking about or not taking it seriously, because they would have been professionals. Jimmy used to say to me, you know, you're playing me.
Look, kids. When he gets to the line, I'm putting him his shirt studs. Some of you are putting them in from the top, and some from the bottom, and you lot look as if you're doing up your flies.
He was the brains. He was a wheeler dealer, always looking for the main chance.
I don't think I was ever wrote myself, actually. There was a certain amount of me in Lardidar Graham, of course, except I don't play the piano.
As the intellectual Gunner Graham, John Clegg proved that as a pianist he was a very good actor.
I couldn't play the piano, quite definitely.
The only true talent was the singer Lofty, played by Don Estelle.
You stepped out of a dream.
He was a very good comedy character and had a heavenly voice. He's wonderfully short.
I can't help being small. I tell you, one of these days he'll drive me too far. I hate him, hate him, hate him!
The only trouble was he couldn't keep a straight face most of the time.
What have we got here? Is it a mushroom?
Completing this awkward squad were the whistling Gunner Clark, played by Ken MacDonald, Mike Kinsey as the paper-tearing Gunner Evans, and the not very strong strongman, Atlas.
Obviously an untalented strongman, because none of the performers in the concert party was actually any good. That's why we hung on to the concert party job, because otherwise we'd get posted up the jungle.
I think all soldiers are very reluctant to get involved in any sort of... they can avoid. I mean, if you lose the heroics, that's how it is. It's how human nature is.
If anyone could force them into action, it was Sergeant Major Williams.
One of these days I'll get you posted up that jungle so fast your feet won't touch the ground!
Windsor Davis excelled in the role, but he wasn't Crofton Perry's first choice.
The first person to read it was Leonard Rossiter. I said, well, you obviously like the script. And he said, not much. It's all stylised stuff. It's all caricatures.
He was rather patronising about the script and said, well, it's the basis of something quite good there. Well, it wasn't the basis of anything as far as I was concerned. That was it, you know.
He sat down, then David was at his desk. And David said, well, I think... And I went to David.
Oh, dear. How sad. Never mind.
As soon as Windsor Davis came into our orbit and into the office... he was obviously the right person. He had the right look about him.
And they were very charming. They said, read that then. And I thought, you know, Cockney Sergeant Major, stick it out loud. And he said, you're Welsh, he said.
I said, well, come back later and we'll sort something out. And David and I wrote a page of dialogue in the sort of Welsh idiom.
And I immediately thought of Company Sergeant Major Morgan of the Welsh Guards, who I met in training. He was a real character, real tough, you know, something. And he had the twisted moustache and all that, you know. And Guys, and he was my model, if you like, for the first one. But when, you see, having been in the army, they're all like that.
He read it, it was magic.
There's no doubt about it. A battery sergeant major is the best job in the British Army.
Croft and Perry also saw that there was more to the sergeant major than giving orders. Developing his softer side quickly became an integral part of the story.
I feel sorry for the sergeant major. After all, he's only trying to do his job, make soldiers out of us all.
What I can't understand is, why is he always so nice to you?
The idea that Parky, Gunner Parky, might have been the result of a brief fling the sergeant major had in Aldershot with Parky's mum, just possibly this could be his boy. That's what kept us from going up the jungle.
There must be a way of stopping Parkins getting posted.
I got it, Sergeant Major, sir.
What?
Concert party.
What?
Concert party.
He gave us episodes of fun all the way along the line, that.
Good morning, Tommy, and how are you?
I'm all right, sir. And how are you?
So the ventriloquist act was added to the lineup. Almost.
Good morning, Tommy, and how are
you? Meet the gang, cause the boys are here. The boys to entertain you. With music and love.
Launched in 1974, It Ain't Half Hot Man was immediately taken to the nation's heart. Its success was down to a British affection for variety and a good old-fashioned knees-up. But on this side of the footlights, one character was pulling rank and stealing the show.
Right, lovely boys. Let's have a look at you. Disgusting!
Windsor just came along and grabbed that part by the neck and throttled it.
It was a fantastic performance, and one quickly saw that he was really the star of this show.
Windsor Davies developed some of the show's most memorable lines.
Oh dear, how sad, never mind. Fine pair of shoulders you got there, boy. Show 'em up, show 'em up.
As Sergeant Major Williams, he had a distinctive turn of phrase, uncomfortably common in the wartime military.
You was a load of puffs, what are you? A load of puffs!
Now, this actually happened with a real Sergeant Major, and that's what he made us shout out. You are a bunch of puffs.
And the 1970s audience just lapped it up.
With comedy, get funny people, but don't give them jokes, don't give them gags. Put them in funny situations.
Right! Pay attention! Is you listening to me, got a second?
Yes, Sergeant Major.
They have the knack, Jimmy and David, of gathering together a group of people who really wouldn't want to be in the same room with each other.
They had people in the show from different geographical locations, and in an army situation you can have different classes all pushed together.
Now, lovely boys, you all knows how to present arms, don't you? Even you, Mr. Lardy-Dar Gunner Graham, with your university education, is not too stupid to do that, is you?
Well, we're rather inclined to do it at different speeds, Sergeant Major.
I think class is very much a feature of any British show. It's a feature of British life, and therefore all our shows have strong class influences.
Right, off you go, Ashford.
Poor blimey. Steering the cruise. That picture last night was a bit of all right.
I don't think you're getting through to them.
The Colonel was ideal for me because I had been at one time, all at the same time, head of the Army in one show, head of the Navy and head of the Air Force.
I bet if some of you could have got your hands on that Ruby Keeler, you wouldn't half have given her one. A kiss, I mean.
Jimmy Perry encouraged me to play the silly arse card. So he said, capitalise the way you speak, the way you move, the way you look. And Captain Ashford was a sheer delight.
I can't think that putting me in the show is going to help a lot, sir.
It will, Ashford, it will. You have great style. Do you know, I think you do one of the finest James Cadneys I've ever seen. I'd like you to do it for me.
Oh, I can't. I feel too fool.
No, do it. Do it. That is an order.
Very well, sir. You dirty rat.
Our conception of a sort of husband and wife relationship. And there was one particular scene where Donald Hewlett, the Colonel, had gone into headquarters and he'd been delayed.
What happened to you last night, sir? I was getting rather worried.
Oh, don't fuss, Ashford.
Where were you?
Well, if you must know, I was having a few drinks with the chaps at GHQ. A few drinks with the chaps? Yes, what's wrong with that? After all, I don't get out much, you know.
There was a wonderful sort of old woman feel to it, really, and it was very attractive, really.
Donald Hewlett and Michael Knowles became known as upper-class twits, and they both capitalised on this in other series. They played futuristic twits in David Croft's Come Back, Mrs. Noah, and titled twits in Croft and Perry's You Rang, My Lord.
We British is the masters here. And as long as that Union Jack continues to fly from that...
It Ain't Half Hot Mum has always claimed to reflect the true state of the British Army in India in 1945.
What is that?
It looks like the Indian national flag, Sergeant Major.
The Indian national, shut up. They've done it again. They've done it again. Get it down, get it down!
But the realities of that time didn't sit well with all of the 1970s audience.
They didn't understand the history period, and they didn't understand the situation of the British in India. And they could only think of one word: racist.
It's bayonets! Squad! Shout! Ready!
We obviously embraced the British attitude at the time, the way the ordinary squaddies and the ordinary soldiers, the white soldiers, behaved to the Indians.
Keep punking it, sit up straight!
Armies don't behave well. It's part of being in the army. You don't behave well towards the natives. If the punkawala gets kicked, I can guarantee you it happened in real life.
What is going on here? Why are those soldiers threatening these poor Indians?
I know that there are many Asian actors who've got this rather snobbish attitude towards It Ain't Half Hot.
You, imperialist lackey, kindly inform the Colonel that it is 1100 o'clock and we are all waiting for the Sergeant Major to apologize.
Things have moved on. In those days, everything was of that nature. You were always expected to speak like this, and if you didn't speak like this, they wondered what sort of a person you were.
Now, a man of your position and importance doesn't want an ordinary apology. So we would like to give you this, and believe me, sir, it comes straight from the heart.
We were there to make people laugh. And sometimes you have to laugh at yourself before people can laugh with you.
We make mistakes when we worry over nothing at all. We make mistakes.
In the early 1970s, Renu Setna was one of the few Asian actors coming through drama school. But Croft and Perry felt they needed a stronger, older comic actor for the lead Asian role of Ranji, so casting proved difficult.
He had to speak fluent Urdu, Ghakkali, and he had to have an Indian feel.
Moonlight becomes you.
There weren't any Indian actors at that time. There was nobody at all. So there was no question of actually putting anybody into the part who was of Indian race, unfortunately.
I said to David, I met this chap called Michael Bates. He speaks fluent Urdu, and he was born in India. He'd be perfect for that part.
It was almost going back to the stage where I first came to the country and my father asked me to go to drama school, and I said no, all the good parts go to white actors with brown makeup on. But when you saw Michael Bates, it was very hard to tell that he was not an Asian.
We ought to give something back, oughtn't we?
Oh, Colonel Saab, the Chief Khan Saab knows what he wants.
Oh, good. What is it?
Colonel Saab, he wants Dorothy Lamour.
In point of fact, he was the only bright person on the unit, as it were. And he seemed to find the solution to most of their problems.
Once again, British ingenuity and cunning have got the better of these damn natives.
He was the most important character in the show.
Michael Bates was an established actor who'd already used his background to play the Asian character Lal Punjabi in The Mind of Mr. J.G. Reader in 1969. He went on to parts as varied as the chief guard in A Clockwork Orange and Cyril in perennial favourite Last of the Summer Wine.
Are you determined to end life as you started it? Dead ignorant? I know it's a family tradition, but you can carry things too far.
It Ain't Half Hot Mum was an ambitious show that was always going to be a challenge for the actors.
On the first day of filming, they looked like a lot of actors in uniforms, you know. By lunchtime, by the time they'd carried their packs and everything and marched around a little bit, they were sweating and they looked like soldiers.
We always used to film Ain't Half Hot. It seemed to be in the end of the summer, the autumn. It was getting chilly.
And you knew that if it was jungle stuff, you'd be down in Farnham, in Surrey. And if it was desert, you'd be in a big sand pit near King's Lynn. And it would be cold. And just before action, makeup would come up and throw glycerine and water on you to make it even colder, and you had to pretend it was sweating hot.
The sweaty look, that was pretty unpleasant. It was glycerine, I think. Glycerine and sugar. Very sticky.
And the wind used to whip up the sand. It used to stick to you. The sickly sweet, gritty taste would linger with you throughout the day.
And the people behind the scenes went beyond the call of duty to make the show a success.
There was a costume lady who did most of the shows. And I'm told that we were wearing her bras. I seem to remember an awful lot of tissues and socks and stuff were required to fill those bras out.
Occasionally, the laughs fell to the extras, some of whom made a lasting impression on Croft and Perry.
I could stay up here all night telling you jokes, but you'd only laugh.
Gordon Kaye's small part led to Croft casting him again in Are You Being Served?, the sci-fi sitcom Comeback Mrs. Noah, and finally the big one, the lead role of Renee in Allo Allo. With a growing audience, the BBC demonstrated their faith in the show by building sets on a scale that had never been seen before in British sitcom.
You could have been at that station. They had goats, they had animals, they had people climbing up, there were people selling things.
There were extras, there were goats, there were ducks, there was all sorts of chaos on this thing.
Do you think I should interfere, sir?
I shouldn't. I expect the Sergeant Major's got everything under control.
To try and be effective, I had to shout over the top of him. And I suddenly went, shut up! And it had gone, you know. And I'm good shit. I didn't know it.
Windsor shouted so much, they rewrote, during the show, they rewrote the character.
Pink gin, sir? Oh, yes, please. Sergeant Major, care for a pink gin? It's very good for the voice. You had a hard time of it on the platform.
No, thank you, sir.
With a large cast and a growing reputation in the world of sitcom, David Croft would not tolerate any trouble in the ranks.
David Croft, I'd say to him, for example, I've got an idea for a bit. And he'd say, show me, Melvin, show me at rehearsal. And I'd do it. He'd say, very funny. Save it for Panto, Melvin.
We used to stand behind David in rehearsal, and Melvin would be pushing the boat out a bit. He'd be trying to do a little bit of extra, and we'd stand behind Croft so that Melvin could see us and Croft couldn't, and we'd be going... as Melvin was doing this wonderful stuff, he'd go...
An actor's function is to read the script, not to write it. So we were always pretty adamant about the actors not contributing anything to the script.
Thank you. Solly is talking.
One member of the cast wanted more from the writers.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but the first billing was Michael Bates and George Layton in with Windsor Davies. But Windsor was so strong, and any writer will grab what he offers and build that part up.
I'll show you. I'll show you the best man here.
He said to us, look, if I don't get any funny lines, I don't want to go on.
When he said, can he have a bigger part, the answer was probably not, you know.
I mean, I didn't think it was going to go for another, 10 years? I don't know how it would go. And I like to think I went with Jimmy and David's blessing.
Life in Civvy Street freed up George to concentrate on his writing career. After penning episodes of Doctor on the Go, he had success in the 80s writing the series Don't Wait Up, and a sitcom based in a publishing house, Executive Stress.
Naturally enough, when George left, somebody had to replace him, as it were.
But the choice of bombardier is Gunner Beaumont.
I think we had a big debate as to whether he was strong enough to be a corporal.
I'm so happy I could cry.
It's good fun, sort of making him try, you know.
So suddenly you had this relationship between myself and the Sergeant Major, who was army all the way.
With respect, sir, I think you should have consulted me before you promoted Beaumont to Bombardier.
What are your objections?
He is a puff, sir.
Gloria, getting my stripes. I was spitting blood.
A house with a door.
George Layton was the only one to go AWOL. For the others, Hot Mum was a springboard for their careers.
I'm so cold, my teeth are chattering.
Stuart McGugan entertained the kids on Play School.
Pina colada for me, the usual for everyone else. Oh,
a word.
And whistling Ken MacDonald went on to pull pints for Del Boy and Rodney.
These drinks or what? All right, don't worry about it, Michael. Don't worry, you'll be all right. No. This slate of yours, Del, is getting out of hand.
But it was Windsor and Don who found real fame, swapping Doolally for Top of the Pops.
You promised me green grass, not to tell what you were. Whispering grass, say.
Well, I heaved a sigh of relief because the guy didn't have to sing. I'm the only Welshman who admits he can't sing, you know.
Sing, Lofty.
Why do you whisper green grass?
What was beautiful was this funny little man, good comedy actor, you know, and this beautiful voice came out. And that was because the public loved that. They couldn't believe it.
Why tell them all your secrets? Who kissed their...
It made #1 for 3 weeks in 1975.
Whispering Grass became an enormous hit, sold millions.
Oh, what a poor song that is!
In Series 4, real-life tragedy struck Michael Bates as he became ill with cancer.
He never made an issue of it, and he was enormously brave to do it. He was coming out to be funny in those circumstances.
This is the story of a young Gurkha boy who is very much in love with a young Gurkha girl.
When we were in the studio, the audience were roaring with laughter. Poor Michael, with terrible pain.
We had somebody else running for him, as it were, and doing some of the physical stuff in the distance. But he didn't like that. He would rather do it himself. A very courageous man and a lovely man.
It was a tribute to Michael. They didn't replace the character. And also the fact is, when he died, they made us move to another location.
Like the war itself, It Ain't Half Hot Mum continued in Burma, and it was business as usual for the Awkward Squad.
I wonder what we did wrong.
Well, if you ask me, sir, a man would have to be in the jungle a damn sight longer than 6 months to fancy Gunner Macintosh.
The Sergeant Major relished the training opportunities the jungle provided.
What is it, Sergeant Major?
Get your head down!
And while he waged his own war, Croft and Perry turned their attention to peacetime for their next venture.
Jimmy was a red coat at Butlins. I used to go to Butlins and put on the professional shows. And I went to 3 or 4 camps regularly.
Hello, campers. This is Gladys Pugh, your Radio Martin announcer. Well, this is the moment I've been dreading.
I realised then that when they were writing this new series, they weren't writing any more of ours. So it was over.
Right, now pay attention, chaps. I've got some wonderful news for you. Yesterday, at 0900 hours, the Japanese surrendered unconditionally.
So many sitcoms, they just go on and wear the characters out. You know, you've got to say, well, that's it. Let's have happy memories, brilliant people, and plenty of laughs.
There it is, lovely boys. Dear old England.
I like sad endings. There's only that much between laughter and tears.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
You look so pathetic. Come on, fellas, let's get changed.
Meat, butter, clothing coupons. Mr. B.L. Williams, civilian.
The army was his mother and father, and he was an orphan. You know, leaving the army, a man with that experience. And it happened a lot.
I suppose most of you are off home.
Aye. Yeah.
I expect you're going straight to Parkhurst or Dartmoor, Sergeant Major?
No, sir. I just heard there's been a bit of a hold-up.
That's a train, fellas. Come and grab your things.
Having been turned down by the prison service, he's leaving the army, he has no job, he has no future.
I mean, that was truth, you see. People did disperse. And they all said, well, we'll see you around. And most of them never did.
What's the matter, boy? You've forgotten something?
Parky comes back and says, have you got anywhere to go, Sergeant Major? No, boy.
Well, no special.
I'll tell you what, you can come and stay with Mum and me until you get things sorted out.
I couldn't do that.
Of course you can. Mum always asked after you in her letters.
You did.
Ultimately, he became a rather pathetic character, and Parky took pity on him and said, why not come to us, It was very touching.
After you, lovely boy. Shoulders back. Fine pair of shoulders. Show 'em off.
Come on, Parky, we're going. Come on.
Windsor Davies went from one long-running series straight to another as an antiques dealer in Never the Twain. He re-entered the world of TV comedy with a part in Sean's Show, and more recently, his and Bombardier Solomon's paths crossed once again in the series Sunburn. But for Windsor Davies, it was the Sergeant Major that really made his career.
On to command 3. Bring both ends horizontal once again. Hey!
It opened doors for me I never knew were there. I thought they were just walls. It was a great time.
That tiara. Couldn't we steal it, Tex?
With Hot Mum heading for the BBC archive, Melvin Hayes saw potential for Gloria beyond Doolally.
But Tex, I'd look lovely in a tiara. And we are supposed to be thieves.
No!
The thing was, I used the same voice, and the New York Times said that this was the greatest cartoon character for 2 decades. So they might have liked Gloria.
After being the voice of Skeleton in Super Ted, Melvin Hayes continued to find work in TV comedy, with appearances in Drop the Dead Donkey, and more recently enjoyed another role with a flamboyant touch in EastEnders.
Oh, Dorothy. I'm a married woman.
After Hot Mum, David Croft and Jimmy Perry continued writing Heidi High, followed by You Rang My Lord. In 1993, they wrote their final episode together. It marked the end of one of television comedy's greatest partnerships, nearly 30 years after they first met on Beggar My Neighbour. It Ain't Half Hot Mum tells a historic story through comedy, and although very much a period piece, it will always be remembered fondly as a cornerstone of British sitcom.
I think it's well up there in the nation's favourite comedy, one of the nation's favourite comedies. I would have thought so.
They used to say that, it's the Queen Mother's favourite programme,
I'm very happy to have done it, and I think it's one of the jewels in our crown.